This past year, we did 2 really big trials of potato plants in large grow bags to explore fertility and growing medium options and to grow a lot more potatoes. One large trial involved growing potato plants in amended municipal compost, and I learned a lot about the need for more fertility. The second, even bigger trial involved growing potato plants in the local topsoil with different fertility amendments, as well as in a range of growing mediums that are not based on soil. In this second trial, I was interested in exploring the idea that potato plants can grow in almost anything and with many different types of fertility. And it was really interesting to see how the same potato plants grew so differently with the different types of fertility and materials in the grow bags, and how abundant and poor the harvest of potatoes could be. We used 90 large grow bags for this trial, each one able to hold about 35 to 40 liters of soil or other material. And I selected 18 different options of fertility or growing medium to try, which meant that there was 5 bags of each different type. There were 10 options or types based on the local topsoil that we dug out of an old pile of topsoil that had been removed during house construction, with each type amended in a different way. And there were 8 types of options, with the bags filled with different soilless growing medium. And we used the same variety of early main crop potatoes, planting 2 seed potatoes in each bag at the same time. We set out all the bags into 5 batches, each batch containing 1 of each type or option, and I tried to position them randomly on the ground cover fabric that we were using to clear some of the overgrown ground around the gardens. This ground cover fabric prevented most of the roots of the potatoes from working their way through the holes at the bottom of the grow bags and into the soil below. Letting the roots have access to the soil below would have been better for the potato plants, but I felt with this experiment it was better to restrict things so that the plants only had the volume and nutrients in the bag itself to rely on. But in some cases, the roots did find their way into the soil, which would have added a variability into the experiment. During the growing season, we also had issues with watering, in keeping the soil or growing medium moist enough and providing the plants with the water they needed, and this was not consistent across the different types of bags. And of course, there would have been some variability in the quality of the original topsoil we used. So this experiment was more set up to better understand the issues and possibilities, with enough of a sample size to be able to get some useful information, but definitely not controlled enough to be able to come to any conclusions. As the plants grew, it was really interesting to see the differences that emerged and how quickly. The growth of some of the potato plants was significantly delayed at the start of the season. There were significant differences in the size of the plants when they were fully grown, and signs of nutrient deficiencies formed quite early for some and later for others. And these differences were fairly consistent with the 5 bags of each type or option, which was a good sign for the experiment, though there were some outliers. As the season progressed, some of the plants were obviously struggling with not getting enough fertility, and in other situations, I would have provided these plants with additional feeding. But in this case, I decided to not intervene, to let things progress as originally started, so that we could better understand what was happening. There were also a fair number of potatoes developing on the surface of the growing medium or soil, and turning green and inedible. But I decided to leave them and not try to earth them up or mulch them in some way, partially because this would have taken a fair amount of effort with all of the bags at a busy time of the year. And I also felt that I could still weigh these green potatoes and include them in the yield data, even if we couldn't eat them. We harvested 1 batch of 18 different grow bag types when some of the plants were still growing a bit and others had died back. And we harvested another 2 batches when the plants had fully died back, and there are still another 2 batches to harvest, which we'll do when we need more potatoes. So the 3 batches that have already been harvested do not represent the full yield data that is available, but it is more than enough, together with observations about the growth of the plants, to be able to make some interesting comparisons. The first set of 5 bags contained just topsoil without any amendments, which served as a baseline, and I was interested to see how potato plants would grow in the local topsoil without any additional feeding. The plants started out okay, but they were smaller than most of the others, and the leaves developed deficiencies quite early in the seasons, and the plants died back before all of the rest of them. The combination of 2 plants in each bag produced an average of about 1 kilogram of potatoes, which is a really poor yield and establishes a really low baseline for the experiment. In another set, we added chicken manure pellets to 5 bags filled with the same topsoil before the seed potatoes were planted, which definitely helped the plants grow better and for longer, ending up with double the weight of potatoes. In another set of 5 bags, we added a comparable amount of conventional fertilizer at the start, and topped up with more of the same fertilizer partway through the season. And these plants did even better, with substantially more nutrients being made available to the plants as they grew, and produced a yield almost 3 times the baseline. So, at a fairly basic level, this topsoil on its own is not very fertile. But simply adding some form of concentrated fertility can significantly boost the yield, at least for the first year. With another set of 5 bags, we added 5 liters of municipal compost, which would have produced a layer of about 40 millimeters on the surface of the bag, but we mixed it into the soil instead, which was probably a mistake. This municipal compost that I get in bulk quantities isn't very fertile and probably wasn't decomposed enough, and might have locked up some of the nutrients in the soil. These compost amended bags produced an average of only 1.6 kilograms of potatoes between the 2 bags, which is not a big improvement for the amount of compost added. This also would have caused problems for another 5 sets of bags, into which we had mixed 2.5 liters of the same compost, before also adding some form of supplemental fertility. To one set, we supplemented the compost with half a liter of complete organic fertilizer, or COF, a general purpose fertilizer that I mix myself from a range of different rock dusts, seed meals, and concentrated sources of nutrients. And to another set, we added 5 liters of charged biochar in with of 2.5 liters of compost before planting the potatoes. With another 3 sets, or 15 bags, we added the same 2.5 liters of compost to the same topsoil, which were then regularly fed with either a liquid feed of a high potassium general fertilizer, foliar fed with the same dilute fertilizer, or doused with an activated compost tea. All these amendments helped to boost the yield compared to the bags with twice as much compost added, though some of them were quite a bit more successful than others. There is a lot to explore with each of these 8 different types of amendments to better understand how they compare and to figure out how these types of feeding can be improved. And there was another 5 bags that were also filled with soil, but with this set I had used the soil from underneath the area where many batches of compost had been made over the years. I simply dug out this topsoil that had been enriched with nutrients and organic matter that had leached down from the compost above, or distributed by worms, and filled the grow bags directly. The plants growing in this enriched soil did significantly better than the other plants growing in the soil-based bags, indicating that there was substantial amounts of fertility and possibly useful biology in this soil. And the larger plants might have done even better if I had been able to keep them properly watered. So growing in amended soil works to varying degrees depending on the amount and quality of the fertility that can be supplied to the plants, which is fairly basic stuff. But it was really useful to be able to see the side-by-side comparison in a fairly controlled experiment like this. With the other half of this large trial, I wanted to explore growing the same potatoes in different growing mediums that were not soil-based. I filled one set of 5 bags with partially decomposed compost from the community composting system that I manage. And the plants did grow really well in this compost as it continued to decompose, with some of the biggest plants in the whole trial, at least for the first part of the season. And then, during a period of dry weather, I had let the compost become quite dry at times, stressing the plants, as well as slowing down the decomposition of the compost, which probably led to less nutrients being made available to the plants. But they still produced a significant yield, among the highest in the whole trial, but probably could have produced a lot more. We also filled another set of bags with the municipal compost, amended with a 1/4 liter of the complete organic fertilizer, or COF mix. And these plants grew very differently to the ones growing in our own compost. For some reason, these plants were very slow to start compared to most of the other plants, as if there was something in the compost that was inhibiting the initial growth. But later on in the summer, these plants started to grow much better. And they continued to grow for significantly longer than many of the other plants, eventually producing a reasonable yield, but not as high as some of the others. The bags that we filled with spent mushroom compost, amended with the same quantity of COF, had a similar slow start, but eventually caught up and ended up producing a slightly higher yield than the municipal compost. And we filled another set of bags with wood chip that had been left to decompose for a few years, amending it with the same COF fertilizer mix, and these plants produced a similar high yield. So the municipal compost, the spent mushroom compost, and the wood chip, each amended with the same balanced fertilizer mix, all produced decent crops, and I suspect they would have produced more if additional fertility had been added partway through the season. And the bags filled with their own partially decomposed compost did even better. These are all unconventional things to grow in, and the material in each case continued to decompose quite a bit while the potato plants were growing, changing consistency and probably the amount of nutrients that are available as the season progressed. We also filled a set with professionally mixed growing medium or potting compost that I buy in, which we further amended with the same quantity of COF mix. And these plants grew really big and also became too dry at times, but produced the same weight of potatoes as the plants growing in our own compost. And we had similar excellent growth, the issues with drying out, and high yield with a mix of bagged growing medium, perlite, vermiculite, municipal compost, and the same general fertilizer. This lightweight mix is similar to what I would use if growing in containers on a rooftop, which weighed quite a bit less than the bags filled with soil and less than any of the other soilless materials. The last two sets of bags were more experimental, just to see what would happen, and they ended up being far less successful. One set was filled with straw soaked in compost tea, with the seed potatoes planted in the small pocket of municipal compost, and then the bags regularly liquid fed with dilute urine. I was thinking that the straw would gradually decompose and the plants might get enough liquid feed to grow in, but I wasn't expecting much, and the results were worse than I thought they would be. These plants were really late starting, stayed quite stunted for the season, and died off early and produced only about half a kilogram per bag on average. In the last set of bags, I tried a similar approach using hay, and the potatoes planted in a pocket of compost. With these plants, I was thinking that the decomposing hay would release nutrients for the potato plants, but it seems the decomposition didn't progress fast enough, and the plants were quite stunted. But they did produce almost as much as the plants growing in unamended soil. I think things would have worked out a lot better if both the straw and the hay had been soaked and fertilized and then left to start decomposing for a few months before the potatoes were planted. With 2 of the 5 bags out of each set left to harvest, some of the yield results could still change. But with the 3 batches that we've harvested so far, the soil from under the compost, the partially decomposed compost, the bagged growing medium, and the rooftop mix all produced reasonably well, but I think could have been significantly better. The bags of mushroom compost and wood chip did better than I thought they would, and I expected more from the bags of municipal compost, but there was something interesting going on with the delayed growth. The use of just conventional fertilizer, a mix of compost and COF, and liquid feeding are all methods that seem to work to help potatoes grow in bags filled with soil like this. The use of biochar, foliar feeding, and activated compost tea, and the chicken manure pellets were less successful, and no doubt all of these could have been improved. The bags with lots of municipal compost mixed into the soil were disappointing, and it has caused me to rethink how I use this low-grade compost in my gardens. The straw and hay experiments failed to produce even a reasonable amount, but provided a good base understanding of how I might refine their approach. And it was really interesting to see how poorly the topsoil produced without any amendments, and shows how important it can be to work to build up soil fertility. Overall, I'm generally disappointed with the results in terms of the amount of potatoes that we've been able to harvest. But I did set up this experiment with the possibility of failing, and I didn't intervene during the growing season when it was obvious that some of the plants were really struggling, and in the process I learned a lot. There is a lot more to explore relating to the different amendments added to the soil and with the different soilless growing mediums, as well as a few other observations, all of which I plan to focus on in future videos. And I'm really interested to repeat this trial next year, refining the different types of fertility amendments to see how much better the potato plants can grow in these bags of soil. Continuing the trial of different soil amendments for several years will be interesting to better understand how the soil and the yields change over repeated season with different amendments. And I'm also really interested in the possibility of using diverse range of organic material from a wide range of sources to grow potatoes and other vegetables in bags like these. And I want to see how much more productive they can get. It will be really interesting to see how the bags of continually decomposing growing medium will evolve and produce over the course of another growing season. And most of them will need to be topped up with more material to fill up the bags again. But the trial this year has already been really useful, especially seeing how obvious it was that some plants were growing really well and other plants were really struggling in a fairly controlled setting. And I was able to confirm that potatoes can be grown in many different types of material. I just need to focus on improving the chance of getting a better harvest in each case.